In this video for PokerNews.com, we are going to watch Michael Addamo, one of the absolute best players in the world, do what he does in super high stakes, no limit hold'em tournaments. This time against another world-class player, Jake Schindler. This is from the $300,000 buy-in super high roller bowl that took place on Poker Go. Make sure you check out Poker Go. They have all the best poker footage that you could possibly ask for, featuring all the best players in the world. Check it out. I actually played this tournament, and I got to play against both these players. Spoiler alert, I did not win, but that's okay. It was a lot of fun, and I'm excited to take a look at this hand and learn from one of the best players in the game.
And Addamo with a 7-8 suited will stay interested, we presume.
So I'm sure many of you watching now know this, but Addamo right there in the discussion for the very best player in the world, among the hottest players in the world right now.
He did fine.
Everybody at this table.
No Koji this time.
Queen 8.
Lays claim to these sorts of things. And as
No
we see,
Koji.
Ali, Addamo fancies this hand at this stack depth for a 3-bet.
Obviously the timing is bad. Schindler having the real deal. But how will Jake elect to respond to this 3-bet? A sizable 28,000.
I think he calls here an awful lot, if not always, and onward.
Jake Schindler makes a standard 2.66 big blind open with pocket queens, and then Michael Addamo decides to 3-bet gigantic to 19 big blinds. This is not something I've seen the solver do, but something I definitely know Michael Addamo does is he puts his opponents in spots that they are perhaps not going to know how to play well. You will see some of the absolute best players in the world do kind of interesting things like this, or like limping from middle position, with a range that is going to be very difficult for their opponents to define. And also, Michael Addamo's probably learned to play this spot very well, whereas his opponents have perhaps not learned how to play that spot well. So even if it is not the perfect GTO strategy, if your opponents are going to play it really poorly and you're going to play it perfectly, it could easily be more profitable than the GTO strategy. So Addamo goes gigantic, 2.66 big blinds, all the way up to 19 with 8-7 of hearts. I think that he's probably doing this with a range containing the absolute best hands like aces, kings, queens, ace-king, and then a smattering of suited connectors thrown in there. But again, I'm just speculating. So over to Jake Schindler, and I think this is a spot where you should have almost no 4-bets. Whenever your opponent takes an incredibly polarizing line, they usually have, like I said, either a really, really good hand or a hand that's not so great. That said, I gotta presume Addamo's range is gonna be really, really strong in this spot, although I could be completely wrong about that. Whenever your opponent does use a gigantic size, though, usually you don't do a whole lot of raising at all. And when you're in position, you also usually don't do a whole lot of raising at all. So it's a spot where Jake just has to call and see what develops on the flop.
Accurately prophesized, and to the flop we go. A pesky overcard, the king of hearts on the rainbow flop. Pair of 7s for Addamo.
We see Schindler keeping a keen eye on Addamo to start things off. Sort of a nice flop for Mike, middle pair and the backdoor stuff.
10 seconds.
Well, let us defer to the Australian for sizing considerations. Looks like he's coming with third-ish.
19,000. Call.
A 19K follow through.
The flop play is pretty standard. On king-high boards, I have to presume Addamo is going to bet frequently and small with almost his entire range. And with a hand like queens, Jake has no option but to call. Some players may think that you should raise to find out where you stand or to protect your hand. But no. You don't want to do that in this scenario, because if Addamo's range is actually aces and kings and ace-king plus a smattering of nonsense, well, we lose to aces and kings and ace-king, and those are never folding. And the nonsense is all drawing pretty thin against the pocket queens. So there's no point in raising. This is a spot where all he can do is call and see what develops on the turn.
Gets called by Schindler. Now, what a big turn card this is, Nick. Open-ender and the flush draw.
I think it's a high-frequency check sort of turn in general, but as you said, Ali, it's a fantastic card for Addamo's actual hand And you do get to put a lot of pressure on things like 10s, jacks, and queens, which are quite real. He does go with the former. And in all likelihood, Jake will be content to check back. Although, again, it is a pretty good card for Jake's range. In theory, he has these middle-y sets, perhaps even some of the small two-pair, and straights. So sometimes you can leverage that to sort of put some chips in and gain some initiative.
While the turn is excellent for Addamo's exact hand, giving him a straight and flush draw in addition to his pair, it's actually a card he should not be betting all that often, because once Addamo bets the flop and Schindler calls, Schindler's going to have a whole lot of pairs and a whole lot of kings. So because of that, Addamo does not want to do a ton of betting in this spot in general. Anyway, Addamo does go for the check, and Jake Schindler has a pretty easy check behind, in my mind. Kind of like on the flop, if he bets and gets called or raised, it's not particularly great. And if his opponent folds, well, he probably didn't have much of anything at all. So this is a spot where Jake has a pretty easy check behind.
But black queens here, not the best.
And the king pairing on the river actually may come as somewhat of a relief to Jake, uncomplicating the texture.
Yeah, I think this could go check bet. And we'll see how Addamo responds to that if this were to unfold. I don't really think we bet for value here, nor do we bluff if we're Addamo. We have quite a lot of showdown.
Check.
And I think for Jake, although it's scary-ish, especially against this guy who's just, you know, a true wrecking ball, I think we go for value on the strength of our kings and queens. And Addamo will have a very awkward kind of decision. Something like 60%-ish seems to be
10 seconds.
ballpark. Let's see.
Deep into the shot clock goes Schindler.
55.
And he fires 55,000, right in that neighborhood.
Rather tricky to decipher. I suppose some of Schindler's flop floats, so to speak, would be bluffing turn. I don't know. Let's defer to Mike here. It's kind of hard to find bluffs, but we have a really good hand. That's an overstatement, but you know what I mean. And is he ever betting worse for value? I don't think so. So we sort of need him to be turning something like ace-jack suited into a bluff. Perhaps ace-queen, whether off or suited. We also need these to have not bluff turn. I don't think he's ever doing this with 4s, 3s, or deuces. I think these would be content to take the showdown. Let's see. It's time bang time, Ollie.
Can't blame him. 151,000 and change in the middle. Certainly would appear that the decision is between call or fold at this point and nothing further.
All in.
Oh my goodness.
All in.
I may have spoken too soon, Nick. I don't think either of us anticipated this savagery.
Yeah, you know, the guy is just really clicking on all cylinders. Has a good hand for it. Hindsight's always 20/20, but he blocks 7s full. He blocks 8-9 suited. Schindler's out of there, and just
Bluff you
bravo.
very much.
Jake is in a pickle. Jake decides to go for the roughly 2/3 pot river bet with the pocket queens. I think you probably want to have 2 bet sizes on the river, maybe more. But I think a hand like pocket queens probably goes into your small bet size, and small on the river would be something like half pot, but whatever. Jake goes for the bet, and back to Addamo. And he decides to unleash the savagery. He decides to rip it all in. Well, this is a spot where almost no one has an adequate amount of bluffs, because if Addamo does have a premium hand in this spot, like a good king or better, he is going to want to check raise all in some portion of the time. What a lot of people do in this spot, though, is they just bet all their kings and all their full houses on the river, and they literally never check raise for value or as a bluff. But if you want to make sure you protect your checking range well, you need to mix in some check raises for value, and if you have check raises for value, you should have some check, raise, bluffs. So, does this hand make sense to check, raise, bluff? And I think it does. You may say, why not just call with it? Because while I do think calling is at least viable, like the commentators alluded to, it's kind of hard for Schindler to be bluffing in this spot. Just in general, again, if he's a good, strong, world-class player, he probably will be, and he is. So it's one of these spots where most people do not bluff nearly enough on the river. Therefore, the 8-7 is probably not very good. Fine. Okay, knowing that, if the 8-7 is not very good, should we use it as a bluff? And when you do want to bluff in spots like this, you want to block your opponent's auto calls, hands that are always going to call a check raise. So what hands are always going to call a check raise? Well, that would be full houses and kings, right? So what full houses are available that make logical sense? Pocket 7s makes a whole lot of sense, right? So you would like to have a 7. Pocket 5s is definitely available, so you want to have a 5. And if you think about Addamo's gigantic 3-betting range from the big blind, remember, this all started with this 19 big blind 3-bet, he probably doesn't have a whole lot of 5s. So if he does have a 7, I definitely think a 7 is a reasonable card to use as a bluff, which he has. I think he would also like to consider bluffing with an ace or a queen in his hand, because those cards block Schindler from having ace, king, or king, queen, which would also be auto calls. So he does go for it with a 7, the 8-7. Over to Schindler, should he find a hero call, you see he actually folds pretty quickly, and I think that the queens are actually a pretty bad bluff catcher in this spot, because if you think about what I just said, Addamo wants to have a king or an ace or a queen in his hand to bluff, and Schindler has 2 queens in his hand, which means that Addamo is way less likely to have a bluffing combination, because he does not have a queen all that often with ace queen or queen jack or whatever. So Schindler just has to let it go. Savage hand, and I definitely would have played this one very differently from Addamo, and it would not have worked out well for me at all. Let me know how you would have played this spot if you were in Addamo's shoes. I thoroughly enjoy watching the best players in the world get in there and battle, and I enjoy battling against them. Looking forward to playing the Super High Roller Bowl again this year. That's going to be a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to get in there and battle. That's going to be it for today. If you enjoyed this video, do me a quick favor. Click the like and subscribe buttons below. Also click the notification bell. And huge thanks to PokerGo for letting us use this footage. Good luck in your games. Have fun. And I'll talk to you next time.